it's better to do it today. Okay, ready? Yes. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I want to start by mentioning China, because if you remember a few weeks ago we dealt with China, we dealt with Japan, we dealt with the tiny tigers, that's Malaysia, Indonesia, and all those Asian countries that were in the late 90s that was making a comeback. They were really making their presence known on the international economic stage. And we also talked about, especially 3 of them got hit around the same time. Now, Malaysia blamed this on Soros. He called his name in words, and Mutaya, he called his name in words. The others didn't say anything specific about, that I can remember, what was happening in their environment and their sphere of activity. But Japan also, Japan had been coming on real strong up to then for about 20 years. Until the way that, if you can remember, the way they treat China now, the way they're paranoid about China, remember how they was paranoid about Japan. Japan was buying up everything. Most of our imports, if you remember in those days how bad the American automobile was. I mean, back in the 70s, they had planned obsolescence, especially in the 70s. But it looked like it was kicked in the late 60s and all during the 70s. Planned obsolescence is that the car wouldn't last no more than 2 years. And we know, we was buying new cars in those days, and that's how long it would last, about 2 years. In 1970, when everybody was driving Cadillacs, few people began to drive Benzes and BMWs in those days, but everybody was still driving Cadillacs. Not only they changed the style every 2 years, but the car in '69 on back had a 5-year and a 50,000-mile warranty. That's on the engine and all the functional parts. In 1970, they changed it to 12,000 miles to 1-year warranty. Can you imagine? Instead of improving, they cut back because they knew that they was going to build a bad automobile. The other thing was remember cars in those days had 4-barrel carburetors. They had 472, the old Cadillacs had 472 cubic inches. The new ones after 70, or even the old Eldorado, had 500 cubic inches, an engine. The gas mileage, I think for my cars, most of them at that time was 11 miles on the highway and 9 miles in the city per gallon. Our gas was 30-something cents, between 30 and 35 cents a gallon, so it didn't make no difference. Gas was so cheap. European cars and Japanese cars were different. Toyotas, Hondas, when the Honda come out in '71, the paint would peel off of it and stuff. It was just like anything in the early stages made in Japan. Japan has a policy of kaizen. That means slow, constant improvement. So when the Honda came, Honda is all the old industries. It was new over here, but Honda, Mitsubishi, they made airplanes and all that during World War II. Those were big companies in Japan, right? They was all Hondas and everything. All the tanks and everything was made by Mitsubishi and Honda, and the airplanes was made by Mitsubishi, you know, the Zero, all of that. Anyway, I'll get back to the point. In Europe, in England, gasoline was about like what it is now. It was super high. So all the cars from Japan, from Europe, from the other side of the world, had high gasoline efficiency, right? So when the oil boycott jumped off in 1973, everybody was driving them big garbage cans, Cadillacs mainly, Oldsmobiles, Buicks, and turning them in. Not the black people, but the white people was turning them in. The used car lots was full of them. Remember in those days, GM, so goes GM, so goes America. Remember how powerful GM was? Unbelievably. It was just a powerhouse. GM, Ford, and Chrysler, and all of a sudden, they was on the last big Brougham they made was a 1985 Brougham. I don't know if you remember what it looked like. It was as long as this Masjid. Remember that big old thing? It was ugly, but it was big. It was big, unbelievable. And so, America lost all of its customers. All of a sudden, Hondas was over here big. Toyotas was over here big. First Toyota I seen, I remember one of my little friends had one, a sister, in 68 or 69, and we used to laugh at it like she has a Toyota, like a toy. Remember, all American cars were big, and all the Japanese cars were small, and they ran better. They last 10 years. And on and on and on. That's how American industry committed suicide. It was suicide. Nobody stole American industry. They gave it away. Then in the 80s, they started that deindustrialization of America. Does anybody remember the books? That's what they call it. Deindustrialization of America. Everything that America is or lost, the big people had the money, they sent Ford, they sent Chrysler, they sent everything overseas to get made, and then finally they improved the quality of their cars a little bit, so an American car is not like a real piece of junk. You can squeeze a little mileage out of it now for the last 10, 15 years or more. It wasn't pure junk like the ones we was driving. Well, not all of them, but they was junk. Now about China today. When we talked about China, what did we talk about? We talked about China and Japan never fighting and arguing with each other, because as long as they have an adversarial relationship, this system would take advantage of one or the other through fear. Now, the Japanese did the Chinese wrong. Really, it was. When the Japanese invaded China in 1931, they changed Manchuria to Manchukuo. You know, Manchuria was rich in resources. The Tanaka Plan of 1923, that's the foreign minister of Japan, called for building Japan to a world dominant position off the back of China. Because remember, Japan is a small country, but it don't have oil and it don't have all of that stuff, and it don't have enough people to do it. So what would it do? It would conquer China. By the time World War II started over here, they had been in China for a long time already. And the war technically started in China in 1931 or thereabouts. So the Chinese developed that's where a lot of the stuff that the language that we use, psychological guerrilla warfare, came from guerrilla warfare that they used in China against Japan. Because they said the analysis was good and simple. China is a big country that's weak, and Japan is a small country that's strong. It was full of stuff at that time. 1937, I don't know if you ever heard of the rape of Nanking in 1937. It was unfair that the Japanese just bombed China. China has a right, now that China is back, see, part of China's self-image was like us, like we had been something way back in history, and the last 100 years was bad. Well, for us it was longer. But for China, it was really big and weak, and everybody took advantage of it. They had the Germans, the French, everybody was in China. Okay. They had signs in the parks in China, no Chinese and dogs allowed. In China, they had the same things. In Britain, no dogs and Irish, allowed, and here, no niggas. But dogs was allowed here, just no niggas allowed. The white man ain't gonna put nothing in it. He can't bring his American dog. He can come to the house, he can come to the Senate, wherever he wanna go. He got it going on. But anyway, the reason we wanted to talk about, revive the discussion on China. China made a serious comeback, and you see China everywhere. So America wanted to decouple, themselves with China. So remember in our discussion, we said we want China to build a vaccine, right? A biological vaccine against biological stuff and anything else. And now they had just started talking a little bit about this in China. I mean, in the news. It was about a month ago. But a lot of people don't believe, they've been talking about it in the news a little bit over there, not over here, about a genetically engineered virus. I don't know if you heard anything from overseas, but they've been definitely talking about it overseas, not over here that much. And we said that we wanted China to build a vaccine and a Negro vaccine to protect Negroes from the anti-white. If like AIDS and all that, if white folks want to get rid of somebody, they we don't have a defense. They can genetically engineer something to knock off most of the Negroes. That it will attack their immune system on exactly the things that are harmful to them. This vaccine supposedly came from a wild animal market in China. I mean, look. Here's what happened. We weren't making jokes about China and protecting itself, because we knew, we always mentioned it, the white man put the Indians on reservations and gave them small blankets of smallpox. He's been doing this. He will do that. He does that. And the CIA is all over the world studying everybody, including China and everybody. Just like China and them was all over here studying Americans, right? Whether the virus was engineered or not, think about the news. 2 weeks ago, China got the virus. We got to decouple our industries. They might have done it to decouple. Remember the fitna between China and America, the trade and all that conflict? Well, the Americans might just say, we're going to develop a little virus, and that will harm Chinese industry. And you remember the first few days, and you could see how happy they was on the news. We may have to find decoupling mechanisms, because 80% of our Tylenol is made in China, and they start running down the things that are made in China.
All the antibiotics come from China.
Almost everything comes from China. Not only do they send your eyeglasses and stuff, zoop, to China to get fixed, or Vietnam somewhere to get fixed, right? So, it's very, and also Iran, remember? Someone came through Afghanistan, and they came from Pakistan, and they went to Qum. If you wanted to distribute a disease throughout Iran, where would you do it from? Qum. Why? Because people go there for religious services. Qum and Masjid. That's what they was mentioning on the news. Qum and Masjid. Because Masjid is where Imam Reza is buried, the Imam. And Qum is that there are students from all over the world in Qum. All over the world. From Qum. From here, from Pakistan, anywhere you can name. So they was happy for a couple of days. Yeah, Iran got this, Iran is lying on how many people got the disease, and they were just having a good field day. All of a sudden, went beyond decoupling. The American stock market took a dip below anything. Now this is from now. It's already had a 10 or 11% or 12% correction already. That means every day last week, think about it. Friday was the last day it closed, and that was 300-400 points. One day is 1,000 points, 800 points. The stock market went into a dip. Remember we talked about if the stock market or if the economy don't crash before the election this year coming up, then the Democrats ought to find a way to lose. Remember we talked about that in detail. Why? Why would Negroes be thinking like that and putting all that together? Nobody else is. Right? Tell the truth. Nobody's arranging their psychic and putting it on this where everybody can hear it. Nobody. They're not doing it. Why? They're not thinking about it. They up on that. Not only the Negroes, but the Muslims, nobody is dissecting that information and processing it the same way we are. So we said, hey, we hope if they don't move before then on bringing the economy down, right, then the Democrats shouldn't even try to win. They should fumble around and pretend. Because soon as they got in there, what would they do? They would drop the economy and blame it on the demo. Right? Not that we care about each one of them. Unintended consequences. What they did, whatever happened, whether they did it or not, but what happened to the Chinese backfired. Who did it backfire? On them. It backfired. I wish, have anybody been paying attention to the panic going on? These Euros are panicked. And they serious liars. They're trying to protect the downward trend. And if you listen to the Hang Seng and the markets in Asia that don't close on Saturday and Sunday like they do here, right? They wide open. What are they doing? From this morning. What does that mean in the morning? It's a good chance that the stock market might take another dip. What does that mean? That the economy is in a free fall right now. Listen, already fell, it falls more than that, but 10 or 11%. When it goes like that, now the American buyer who just buys, that's what keeps the economy up. What's going to happen? No, not what's going to, what's already happened. They put their money in their pocket and they ain't buying nothing. When they don't buy nothing, what happens to America? It goes down. When the stock market lost $3.5 trillion in a week. Those are trillion. Trillion is what, 1,000 billion? $1 trillion, 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. That's a little bit of money. 1 trillion. 3.5 trillion. In less than a week.